A very good afternoon to one and all who has joined this inside discussion on the topic Individual Life and Politics, a lesson from 1947. Ever since we evolved as a civilization, an element called polity became an integral part of our life. After the commencement of British, it took a massive turn and the status quo, it, it turned out completely upside down. In after after decades of freedom, after we after decades uh, and the possession of democratic power and freedom, there was a paradigm shift on the element called politics. And today uh, we are going to have a discussion panel, and I would like to introduce our contestants. And first, it is going to be Abansha from Madhya Pradesh. Hello, Abansha. And Amit from West Bengal, and Mishika from Punjab, and Anobik from Jharkhand. In the first round, uh, the contestants are requested to share their general views on how the individual life is interlinked with politics and how does it reach the peak ever since 1947. I request the contestants to express their views within 3 minutes of time. Uh, first I would like to call upon Abansha to share her views. Abansha, over to you.
Thank you, Kavya. Good afternoon, one and all. Uh, so this discussion, thank you for the opportunity. And let me start that as Britishers, as a group of foreign traders, they entered into the politics gradually. So initially they were just allies of the country powers, then they became the virtual directors, and then they had the finally being as masters. So we are focusing on the kind of evolvement of Britishers as political powers, and then the lives what the Indians and the other kinds of communities focused in there. So when I see the kind of impact what individuals' lives suffer, there are kind of dimensions to it. The dimensions could be employment and the wealth, then education and the path for career, then the society, the social fabric, the cultural fabric. So these are the four, broader kind of perspective which we can look upon and see how their individual lives were impacted by that kind of politics in play. So when we see the politics evolved from different forms, starting from partnership of rulers like Mughal, Marathas, and Britishers to single domination of the Britishers, and then individual lives varied with considerable effects. So when I start with the employment part of it, there were displacement of classes. Taking an example of Bengal, there were lesser landlords that were reduced to conditions of tenants. Then there were disturbance among zamindars. There were permanent settlements also, where the selling of land became an inevitable measure for the very farmers of there. There were taxable income, there were revenues fixation. So that kind of which was Lagan part of it, impacted the lives of the farmers and those lower classes of a lot. Then at the second level, there were societal classification of the people. There were peoples which were totally against the Western influence, absolutely against, and then they were totally wanted to live in their past and what all they have lived for. Secondly, those were the peoples which were the employees of the government employees. They served for Britishers and then maybe Mughals, and then they continued that they just wanted to do their duties, taking into consideration that they want their traditions to be alive and the cultural integrity. Then third, there were remaining, culturally integrated Hindus and Muslims and other part of the societies which began to study Western ways just to have their progress in their careers. They just wanted that I want to live up to those things, and I just want my careers and pathways that way. Then there was another classification who studied European ways, who studied the British influence in order to make it integrated within their society. So they wanted to adapt to themselves also. That yes, some of them were admirers of the Britishers, some of them was like they wanted, because local powers is always inevitable to have that kind of dominion within the regional integrity. In that sense, employment was a very big thing at that point of time, which impacted the lives of the people, and obviously favoring of the Britishers. Then at the educational social level, I see English as a language was a kind of thing which was very much promoted at that point of time. I have seen excerpts where William Benedict imposed that we want Western influences and powers to be eradicated to the Indian forms, and he introduced a lot of reforms to introduce those kind of Western ways, and telegraph, modern irrigation, railways, and those were all those things. Colleges were, became the center of the Western influence. Promotion of English language opened up paths for employment and influence. In terms of social fabric and cultural fabric, there was, paradigm shift in fashion also. Lives of people kind of dressing what they were trying to do, what they were trying to become, in order to just, portray what they wanted, and how can they become and grow in those societal hierarchy. So at that same time, there were few who advocated British languages, and at the same time, there were, people who were totally against it. There were a lot of reforms that were there, but, these kind of, cultural, social, employment, and education wise, we can see a lot of it. And I think I have touched upon all those in bits and pieces of examples, and we can continue with other people as well. So thank you, Kavya.
Well, that was thank you for the valid insights, Abansha. So next, I would like to call upon Anobik Dey to share his views on the same. The screen is yours, Anobik.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, before getting into the insight of 1947, I would like to define what politics is. If we consider the Hindi word for it, which is Rajniti. So, politics is basically the policies that are used to govern a country or an organization and even a state. So, it's not only a country level aspect, but it has wider dimensions. Apart from that, the other thing is that politics has not only been in place when the Britishers came; it has been in place through ages, be it through Vedic times or the invasions of the Mughals, their settlement over here, and till the Britishers, and even today, we have corrupted the form of politics. We think of politics as just the ways and means in which we can manipulate things for others, and it has actually destroyed the real essence of politics. Same thing was there when Britishers were there. They planned everything accordingly to their will, their way of life. We had a different set of values for how politics should be conducted, how the states can be governed, but they changed that. This effect had led to massive disintegration of the civilizational structure of India, which was based on kind of what we call in Hindi seva parmo dharm and kyo arjine do, live and let live. So that got affected badly with the inclusion of British in our country, and after from there, from 1947, we have taken into a path which is actually little diverted from what politics should be, and hence the reforms are required. This is the first aspect. The second aspect is politics not only involves just a country. Politics is a part of every individual's everyday life. It can be in an organization structure also. There are policies based on how the people should work and how the organization should carry their stuff. So, considering both the points, we have to look politics in a wider perspective, not what current media reports, and think of the fact that policies are the major source of good governance, and which should have started from 1947, and but we have actually deviated from them.
Very well said, Anubik. Now, I would like to call upon Amit from West Bengal to share his views on the same. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Kavya. And I will also start from the definition of politics. In my views, the politics are the framework or the policies or the guidelines in which a country is ruled. Now, a country is made from society, family, people. So, this in other words, we can say that these are the policies or the framework or the guidelines which is going to rule or impact the life of a common man. So, in my views, yes, politics makes a very much impact on the life of a person, whether it's employment, whether it's food security, whether it's safety, whether it's uh, hygiene issues, whether it's health issues, anything that is completely governed by the policies and which are made in the arenas of politics. Now, starting from 1947 till date, yes, we have evolved a lot, but more evolution is required, in my view. There are some draconian laws like sedition charges, 124 IPC, or the like this kind of laws should be amended or should be uh, taken care that whether they are needed nowadays also or not. So this kind of evolution we require in during the creation of constitution. There are many fundamental rights or fundamental duties has been mentioned there, but they require to be more modified nowadays because time has changed and evolution is required. So from my point, thank you.
Still have time. You can share your perspective from different dimensions, like you wish.
No, I have covered everything in this that politics is impacting every corner of your life, whether it is employment, whether it is education, whether it is food, whether it is security, whether it is shelter. Everything has been governed by the politics. We have the rules, we have the laws, and we have to act according to them. Now, the thing is whether these laws are impacting positively or negatively, we have to judge that one. Like I have mentioned one specific article of IPC, Indian Penal Code, Section 124, this is citizen charges. Now, does this citizen charges is opposing our Article 19? Now we have to decide that one. Like, if we are going to judge between sedition charges, means my right of freedom of speech is being reduced by Section 125 IPC. Now the people of country needed to decide that what we want. We want those draconian laws which was implemented by Britishers to curtail our rights and still continue till now. Do we need that, or do we need those kind of laws or those kind of set of policies in which we can live freely?
Okay. Thank you, Amit, for your wonderful insights. Now, like icing on the cake, I would like to invite our special contestant, Shila Aditya from West Bengal, to share his views on the same.
First of all, I want to defer that word special. I am not uh, going to add anything special over it, but I'll try. So most of the points they have discussed. So I'll rather tell a story regarding this livelihood and politics. I think it will make the point. So there was a village named Angarbari. Okay. So it was in Bangladesh. Right now it is in Bangladesh. At the very beginning of this colonial culture and all, this Bengal was a united Bengal province. So at a very fine morning in 15th August 1947, the people of Angarbari, they saw that they are just now surrounded by India, and the problem is they are now in East Pakistan. So everything was fine till 14th August. Everything was just like another day. Just because of this politics, they found themselves in an isolated island. So it has a historical purview also. And after that, in 1990s, or in that decade, India and Bangladesh got another treaty, and they had got a passage that called Teen Bigha Corridor. And so this kind of corridor, it was given on lease basis to the Bangladesh, so that these Angarbari villagers, they could get the free access. So my story ends here, and I think discussion should open from here also. So the livelihood is totally dependent when politics ruins them. And if politics do well, like we have the example for that also, like East Germany and West Germany. for the sake of good politics or the reason behind their unification is only dependent on the good politics. So rather going to that sense, whether politics and or how it is going to impact the life of or the livelihoods of the humans, we can also divide it in two ways. So one is good politics, another is bad politics. So good politics is always welcome and it is going to do the best in our society. And bad politics, again, we have to do a research which is bad. So bad is not that much descriptive. What you think, like, for example, we many of us think Jawaharlal Nehru. He was a nation builder, but few differs. So bad also have many dimensions. So overall, if we go, if we do politics in a great sense and keep these things in our mind, that it is actually going to help the people. So I think politics is the best way to enrich the livelihoods of the society, and above all, it will do the best to the humankind. So I think I should end here. Thank you, Kavya.
Thank you, Shiladitya. Now, we need to ask, I mean, each and every contestant deserve 2 questions, and each of you can give 2 questions. I mean, like, each contestant can be given 2 questions now. So, yes, Nitin sir, he's the first person to.
I think I should bring my questions at this point of time, so that and these questions should be answered by all the 4 contestants. Okay, so you forgot that complete topic was politics and individual lives, lessons from the partition 1947. You did not touch that 1947 thing. I wanted these facts coming from your mouth, that according to one estimate, 15 million people were displaced, and around 1 to 2 million people were killed in the partition days, and around 75,000 to 1 lakh women were kidnapped and raped. These are the facts touching the lives of the people. So on the basis of these facts, I want answers from your sides. Who were responsible? If you don't want to name the people, then at least try to identify the processes. And if definitely, even if the processes were working, people were definitely involved, then were the guilty ever punished? If not, why? And can we declare the partition as a genocide or crime against humanity? So these are my questions to all of you. Please answer these questions one by one. Kavya? Yeah, you
Amit, you can start. Because you are running out of time. Amit can start, I guess.
Okay. Yes, sir. You have asked very much factual questions that who is the responsible. So yes, at that point of time, whoever was the policymakers was completely responsible. Yes. Second question was yours that can they be punished? No. Till now they cannot be punished. Reason being the power is with them. And if we want to take the power from them, as we are in democracy, so but that is not possible till date, because there are multiple dimensions while we are voting. We take the favor of our community, our caste, and we vote for money also. That is also a fact. So yes, they should be punished, but they cannot be punished till now. And yes, a partition should be called a kind of genocide, because while you are partitioning the 2 countries, you should take the account of people, so that there should not be any harm to any community. Thank you.
So next, Abansha, are you ready to take?
Yes. Yes. So Definitely, to add on to what Amit has already shared, not just policymakers, also the political parties that were in play at that point of time, with Muslim leading parties and Hindu leading parties. There were a lot of players that were involved in these cases. The policy making was one side influenced by all these elements and the kind of players that were in role at that time, and also with the peoples and the revolt that were going on. In that sense of individuals were also integrated with these fabrics and all these processes which were in place. But definitely the stand and the accountability stands on the leaders and the important political players at that point of time. And yes, that has to be a genocide, that could be and has to be declared as a genocide in terms of what displacement and mass killing that were happening. In terms of how if they can be punished, I think there are laws which have retrospective views in terms of what a society has done, what a region has done, what a territory has done over the past few years to the humanity or the culture. And there are multiple ways to work that along. But yes, there could not be a stringent ways, because nobody is alive at that point of time to be punished for. Like, who will you say that this one should be punished or that one should be punished? So that way, a retrospective compensation could be given, or some ways that maybe, but that is a very big scar on a society which is beyond just the monetary and the social and other kinds of benefits. That is an emotional way also to get them. Now, coming on to the question where these things, how can they be improved or such can be done? There are definitely international laws, there are international bodies, governments, which can work on these forces and ensure that such kind of practice are banned from the past and not just happen again in the future practices. So yes, that's. Thank you.
Thank you, Abansha. And next, I would like to invite Shilla Aditya to share his views.
Thank you, Kavya. So, sir has asked a question. So, I just want to arrange them in chronological order. So, first of all, if it is genocide or not. So, obviously, it isn't genocide. If Syrian murders or Syrian mass killings is a genocide, so an incident which has occurred 50 years back, nearly 50 years back, and has an impact of killing 2 million people, nearly. So, it is also a genocide. Now, if it is a genocide, then there should be someone to be blamed. Otherwise, how it has happened? So yes, I want to name that. And obviously, it is the government of that time, and that was the British government. So they did that partition, and they took a minimalistic measure to ensure the security and all the aspects of the commoners. So yes, they should be blamed. And now I'm coming to the first or the second question. I forgot the order. The how it can be compensated. So yes, obviously it can be compensated. The war crime, if it is, we can, if it is been established. So I think Britishers should compensate on that. But here I just want to bring another aspect. I think few years back, uh, regarding that Jallianwala Bagh massacre, Britishers, I mean, Indian government just wanted to just ask them to convey a kind of apology, but they denied. British government of this time, they denied. The apology from the government end, it's still not uh, in our place. So my point is, just because they are in the uh, Security Council of these United Nations, they have all the veto powers. We cannot say anything against them. So India or other countries like India, those which were the colonial, I mean, I would rather say those are the stations for the Britishers to supply their inventories. So I think they should be blamed, and they should pay the contribution towards India for our development. Not only India, India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, of course. So because we were the victim at that time. So I think this. Thank you, Gautam.
So now we heard some perspectives from Shila Aditya. We are yet to hear from Anubik. Anubik, the screen is yours.
Thank you. I'll have some very strong and differing opinion over here. So let me start by making a statement that one religious sentiment overwhelming a complete country in a non-democratic colonial state is totally unacceptable. So yes, it was 15th of August 1946, just 1 year before the independence, whenever we didn't even think of that there will be a genocide or something like that. Most of the things we were focusing on was that the INA soldiers have done a revolution, then the World War II being over, and the United Nations getting formed. But it was on the 16th August when the Direct Action Day was proclaimed, and everything started, every mismanagement started, every other thing started, which can be termed as the genocide. So we can hear stories from both the side, be it India, be it Pakistan. We can hear from both the side, but we should always remember that there are obviously knee-jerk reactions to every atrocity, and this was a case of that. So the second part of the atrocities is mainly because there were, you can say, traitors, you can say criminals on one side, and to sum up the fact that who were responsible for this, yes, the leaders are to blame, because when the people needed them the most, they were busy maybe forming the constitution, framing the laws of the country, and not paying heed to what is going on. The civil servants also at that time gave up, just to fear, in the fear of their lives. Uh, but I will also like to add that it is the mistake of the normal people of the country. The fact that Muslim League was continuing to assert its dominance was pretty clear from 1939 or 40, I don't remember the exact date. And a united front against the entire country. I will not say whether it was against the Hindus or the Jains or Sikhs, against the entire country was being formed. So the people also had to be aware in a situation like this. Plus the realization that the government is not their own government, it is not a democratic government. Then it should also make the people more aware of the fact what is happening around. So it has both the aspects: the leaders' ignorance and the leaders' the greed of power, and along with that, the ignorance of the citizens of what was happening around, um, is to add to the violence. So that will be my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Anubik. Now, Nitin sir has some supplementary questions with the sequel of what he asked before. Sir, over to you.
Yes. So according to IPC section 302, the punishment for murder is either death penalty or imprisonment for life. But as we have seen, if you kill 1,000,000 people, then there is no punishment for you. How do you wish to convey this message to the fellow citizens in your own words that politics is a very serious affair, and why we should be so much concerned, and especially the message to some people who would say we will not vote at all. You know, all these people are not good. So a message from your side for the fellow citizens to raise awareness in this regard.
Anyone can take initiative. Like anyone who is willing to answer the question can take initiative.
Can I have the question again?
So we have seen that if you kill 1,000,000 people, then you don't get punished for it. The people who are in power, they are above the law. So do you think that citizens should be more aware about these dark sides of politics, and that you cannot afford to be just the takers of the politics, but participation in politics is very much required, and especially a message for those people who simply say that politics is bad, politicians are not good, so we will not vote at all. I want message from your side. What are your views on this? Are you also the one who would say no, politicians are wrong, we will not vote for them? Or you would like this to be a responsibility on the shoulders of every citizen to make politics better and to strengthen the democracy in the country?
Sir, definitely with the there should be voting for each and every part, each and every citizen. But there is some more dilemma in the question which you asked. For example, if I am not getting food, and if a political party came and gave me 500 rupees to my family and asked to vote for my favor, I will vote. Reason being, I will not look about the future that whether they will uh, again pieces again harm me or not, but right now I am getting food. So this is one of the basic problem in our Indian society. We need to address first our basic needs, then we can go to the next second stage where we can get democratic government, where the participative government can be formed by each and every citizen of India. And one more thing which you said that I will not vote, all the politicians corrupt. So yes, this is a general phenomena which we have seen, and to bring a change, we need to vote. Now the question is, if everyone whom I voting is corrupt, who should I vote? So now I have to raise people from people who knows politics, who is good. I should vote them. Now sir, again I will like that in Hindi कि there दो चोर खड़े हैं, मुझे जो कम चोरी करे उसे चुनना है. So it is the major problem of nowadays society.
Shiladitya,
Yeah. Thank you, Kavya. So again, a story, boiling frog story. When you put a frog inside a boiling water, it will just leap out. It's instantly leap out of the boiling water. But if you keep a frog in a pan, pour some water, and then you keep, then you keep the flame on and boil the water, it will try to adjust itself to death. It will die, but it will not come out. It will try to adjust its own temperature, and in this way, it will just going to finish it all energy, and it will die. So we, the common people, should not be like that frog. We should come out. We should react. We should give our views whenever we will get chance. We should not adjust ourselves to the politics of the society that is not going to do any good to ourselves. So bearing and just allowing everything to be happen with you, with the commoners or with the common people, is just going to bring death to the society. So we just come up. We need to say, we need to speak, because Constitution has given us that opportunity. Article 19 has been provided with a lot of opportunity to speak up. Until and unless we are going to do something for the society, society is not going to change by its own. So in ancient Greece also, from the very beginning, or 500 or 600 BC, they used to ask questions. Even Socrates got death penalty for asking questions. So I think society should ask questions. To whom they will ask? Obviously, they will ask the politician who has got the challenge, who has taken the responsibility to run the society in a good manner. So they should answer. Our parliamentary constitution has given us the opportunity to select the participants, the MPs or the MLAs. We should ask from them. I mean, they are the mouth of us. They will ask for us at the parliament. So at the very basic level, we should choose that person very wisely, who can ask question wisely. So that is my point. So I think it will be the best way to do a good governance. Thank you.
thank you, Shiladitya. Now, Anobik, can you please share your views?
Thank you. So the thing is, who is to blame for this? If you kill a million people, then there's no punishment. Thing is, we should not forget the fact that it's just not one person. There are coordinators with that person, and it should be the responsibility on the shoulder of the entire leadership of that time. If genocide like that happens, be it in 1947 or be it in current time. Secondly, we are fortunate that we have a democratic state. Although we might not be in the highest form of democracy, but still we have the blessing to actually express our vote, our representative. And we should also take into consideration countries like Lebanon and Syria, which are reeling under constant threat and of militancy, terrorism, and even um, uh, continuous genocides. So yes, participating in democracy, keeping in these two examples in mind, is very much required if you do not have a proper side to choose. And the last one is message for the non-voters. Yes, you should go and vote, be it a bad or a worse, whatever the comparison is. It is necessary to choose. The bad and the worse can be full definition of bad and worse. It might not be bad and worse for others. There can be people who might be benefited, who might be the who belong to different sections of the society who are underprivileged. They can also get benefited. So it is required to go and vote. You should not say that the person is bad and just not. That's my point, Kavya. Thank you.
Thank you, Anubik. And finally, Abansha, over to you.
Hello, sorry, I was speaking on mute. So as we have seen, most of the contestants have picked up the point and how this thing could be done. I strongly agree to the point that, and the message I would like to convey is that if you don't participate in the electoral process or the democratic process, you are giving the leaders all the rights to play with your lives in every aspect. So starting with the democracy, I like to, aware people of the very essence or the very definition of democracy is that it's for the people, by the people, from the people. So if you see how very important the essence of people is, it's up to you. So just don't wait until any kind of policy or any kind of decision is impacting you or affecting you. Take up the stand right and upfront when you feel that something is going wrong, something is impacting others in the society, because eventually it's going to come down to you as well, because you are the part of the same society. And then the very right thing is about asking the questions. Yes, ask the questions where you are getting things done, how you are getting things done, why is this right, why is this wrong. And the next point I want to add is that not just selecting the right candidate. Sometimes people also should look upon that whether they should be the part of the democracy, whether they should also be coming up front and being the part of electoral process. Go into the elections yourself as well. Start being the representative itself, because if not the literate and educated people like us or the other, who you are going to say, because like Amit pointed rightly, that who to choose from the lesser evil. Like, why do you want to choose from the lesser evil? Why should not we encourage people which are not at all evil? So that from the ending remark, we should also encourage people to stand up on their own, not just being on the asking question side, but also from the answering question part of also. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Abansha. So, sir, so is there any questions that you have in mind that you need to put before any of the contestants?
Now we can go for the voting, and
Okay.
the questions can be asked to the two candidates. So I will be voting for all of you, and today you people should also vote not for yourself, but for the rival candidates. Okay. So you have been given 10 marks, and out of 10 marks, you can give your score to the rival candidates. Okay. You have a total 10 marks. You want to give 10 to one person, give 10, or you want to give 5, but your total should be 10. Okay. Give marks to the rest of the people.
So after a tough competition, we have two contestants in the round now. Like, I would like to declare those two contestants on the screen. It's Abansha and Shiladitya. And now we are going to have the second round. And in this second round, any contradictions on the previous views of each of the contestants can be expressed. And in this round, we have 4 minutes for each contestant, and you can share your views on the same. First, I would like to call upon Shiladitya.
Yeah, thank you, Kavya. So, should I go for a specific question or just I can carry it on?
Shall I ask the questions? You can give me, I shall ask the question.
Yeah.
So, trade played a major role in providing foothold to the Britishers in India. Do you think economics has the power to change the political equations? If yes, should we be watchful of the role of the multinational corporations in our country? If yes, are we actually keeping a watch on this, the role of the multinational corporations? To what extent our economy is being taken over by the multinational corporations, and how much chances are given to the common Indians, and how much percentage of chance is given to the rich people in this country? Please share your views in this context.
Thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity to share my views on a very pertinent topic. These multinational companies. So, if I take back it to the early 18th century when Britishers came to this land. So at that time they were the multinational company. Okay, so East India Company, it was a shareholding company at that time, and as we all know, they started their business, and gradually they came to the polity of India. How they did, it's a common story. So I'm not going to that detail also, but the few facts that I want to ensure, that I want to mention, that before these Britishers they came into this place, this India, uh, only this Bengal and surrounding area, they covered almost half of the trade in muslins. All the uh, I mean, those garments industry. But after they came, this industry just collapsed, and yet we are going to get a foothold on that industry after these 200 years. So that is the importance of economy in the polity. Now, I'm going to current times. So how a multinational company can do good to a country and how bad it can be. So few years back, VN Sri Krishna committee, they gave a good report on the uh, right to personal information. So these things, these multinational companies like Microsoft, Amazon, or Google, they are just doing their business out of our own data, and we all know data is nothing but the key to the industry for now. So Indian government tried hard to come up with a data localization plan. So they asked these companies to keep a copy of their data, the personal data, in the server of India, anywhere in India, but they denied. They were not ready at that time to go with the plan and to give a fair chance for Indians to keep their personal data inside their country. So this is the very big example how multinational companies are playing games with the polities. Now, this example, I can take it back to 1757. Same kind of event at time happened. How it happened? This East India Company, they were forbidden to build a castle, that is Fort William, and they didn't heard to Nawab of that time of Bengal, Nawab Siraj-Dowla, and they just carried it on, and that actually turned up in a fierce battle of Plassey. So things are quite similar. you are not going to hear this multinational company for their economic foothold. They're not going to hear the politics or the political power of a land, and they just take it in their own. And it is very dangerous. And it is dangerous to that extent that it can topple the government also. It did at that time, 1757. And if we don't have a good hold on these companies, or if we just give them a fair enough chance to do their business anyway. There is another thing I want to mention. In 2008, there was a global massacre. I mean, in terms of economic sphere, there was a very big recession. And Indian government, just because they had a hold on the banking system through Reserve Bank of India, we came up with a good solution. We had the restrictions on our bank, we had the SLR, CRR and all, and we came up with a good solution at 2008 recession. But those countries where they had no such things, they had purely open market, they had no hold over their business, over their economy, like Thailand, Indonesia, though they are big names, but they couldn't, they couldn't get rid of that thing, that recession and all. Because of that, politics are not there. Politics are not going to play any role in their economies. So for me, I think to avoid such a massacre in future, I think politics and the policies should be amended in such a way so that the economics or the business could be in the sphere of this land or the rule of this land. And this is the way to get rid of these big problems. Thank you, sir.
Yes, Abansha, it's your turn now.
So just to add, I think he very rightly pointed out how the MNC's problem can turn into worst examples, like how the MNCs and the other foreign traders or the other foreign parties, or not just foreign parties, any privatized body which is having a good set of amount of power in the land, influencing economy, and a large section of people can have in politics and the overall economics of the country. Just to add on that, rule of the land, not just abiding by the rule of the land, it should also have a very strict non-compliance measures of punishment for that. So if I take the example of what he has already shown, that if a MNC fails to comply with the rule of the land, and what Indian government or what the country government is forcing them to do, and just making sure non-compliance at a very strict level, we should also be very strict that how we can make sure that this is no longer going to continue, and then we have to stop it, we have to end it. For the just namesake of economy, sometimes the Indian government, be into the part of the lobbyist section of the parties of the economy, and goes into like, okay, ease of business is something, ease of doing business is something which we want for our economy, we just want our boost, and we just want to develop. But far-sighted repercussions of those actions can be far worse than what it can, and he has already given such kind of examples. So not just regulating these bodies through laws which are non-compliance, but also giving a very set of rules of punishment that your business is going to end, mister, if you continue doing so, and not supporting the kind of economy it is driving. So taking very strong foothold to deny their operations in our country or in our land. Another example of such kind of a thing is even just the measuring of GDP or country-wise indexes, that where just the top notches of the countries are considered. UN is coming up with such kind of indexes where happiness is also taken into account. So when the question is that whether the chances to Indian is also given to the countrymen and taking part in the economy, I think those indexes at a very global scale can play a major role in deciding that you are not just judging any country or a land based on that economic factor, you're also taking into account social and other factors. That will make sure that just the government which has to take the decisions whether or not an MNC should be allowed in a country or not can help them better regulating it. Another thing is, recently there is controversies about the cryptocurrencies as well, whether it should be legalized, whether it should not be legalized. I think there is far way more worse. Similar kind of situations happens when a new, system is introduced, like Reliance introduced broadband Geo. It was a revolution all around. But, it could have happened that, now we are in a basic part where that MNC played a very good role in the economics. That it led to the growth, but it could have unfolded in a very different way. But our government, tried to regulate it. We had certain kind of things, but what if not? So that what if component, if we, seriously regulate and see that what all it can unfold to, because ultimately the office or the institution is to be blamed on, the MNC for the government. So in that sense, I would definitely support what Shiladit has said, and also add that, compensatory and non-regulatory, non-compliance, strict standards should be done, not just for the sake of economics, but also for the social and cultural benefit of the country. Yes, thank you.
Hello again. Now we have to switch to that genocide part that Sir previously mentioned. It is a very disappointing thing. What happened during 1947 was a very disappointing thing, which shouldn't have happened. But as days passed, we are living in we are living in a democracy, and we got to see a lot of technological evolution, and a lot has changed ever since 1947. What are all the factors which diluted this particular issue over time? What really happened? Which factors actually diluted these issues, and it remains to be unnoticed? And what are all the things behind that?
I would like to appreciate Kavya for asking such a relevant question. It's a very nice question. Yeah, go. Yeah.
Can I? Hello.
Yes, you are audible, Avansh.
I think yes, appreciation is there, that many factors diluted these things, and the that emotional and a very disheartening episode of Indian democracy and India as a land, India as a country. Now, what I see, what has diluted is at times the families and people want peace for the time. So one of the very important aspect is, long-term time heals everything, but not everything. But yes, there is a saying that when you see the time is passing by, nobody wants to collect the bad memories and the past bad influences of that. At one point, there could be revenge. Psychologically speaking, what people feel that, okay, this thing has happened with me. There are two kind of phenomena what generally happens. You can either fight or flight. So one thing is getting back or revenge into these things, that, okay, this happened and I have to get back to something. And at that time, they might have, the families went into, military forces, went into, protecting their land, so that this went into the politics, so that this doesn't happen further. At times, other families, other people particularly left this. They just left it as it is, and then going it that, okay, this has happened and let's just focus on the future. Let's focus on the next generation has to come, and what has the past is and past as. Other factors which politically, which has played different kind of roles is there are multiple policies which has led to, compensating those displaced people. Sometimes I'm not aware of all those, but yes, that freedom fighters were compensated in multiple ways, giving reservations, giving to educational institute, giving reservations at the railway traveling, and employment basis. Multiple things were done by the government side of it. So some of it has impacted the families. Okay, that maybe not yesterday's government, but today's government is doing something for me. That has been one thing. Other ways, societal development is also formed, where, not just stark divide between, whether you are from Pakistan, whether you are from India. I'm taking the example of our land only. for the genocide, that you are not no longer identified by that, and the culturalist new generation is trying to blur that boundary, that we are human above all, and that we do not want to have those things in onto our account, that whatever the past has happened, and let's just move on to new generation and new future of that. So political, even the cultural part of it, where the various religions are trying to intermingle with and intersect with others, one another, to see and celebrate the different varieties and the different cultures and festivals together. So I think these multiple factors led to that individual level memories of going forward to it, fast forward to it, that let's just move forward, and now we have a very bright future and new things to look upon. And I think in terms of sustainability, if we look upon climate change, it's a very big issue right now to address upon, and if that thing is going into awareness of people and the individuals, families and society, that could really change the aspect that yes, something that has happened should not happen in future, and we should look upon the new evils coming along in more the future times. So yes, Kavya, I think if you have any other things, I think I have tried from my side attempting the question.
Thank you, Abansha. I mean, like, it was, it was a very apt answer for what I asked for. And now, Shiladitya, it's your turn.
Yeah, Kavya, this is a very pertinent and very serious question to answer. I must appreciate you for this. And to add something with Avangsha, Avangsha just told one phrase, that humanity one. So Rabindranath Tagore, he has a very famous poem where the head is held high. But the first line which starts, where the mind is without fear. Okay. So a country or a state which is too much underprivileged. And do you really think a person who has lost its home, lost his family, lost his everything, he has that much courage to say anything about his grievance? Because without saying anything, he has lost so much things. So where this courage she or he had to come up and ask anything? All the refugees, I mean, being a person from West Bengal, I have seen this trouble. And even after those genocide, the most refugees have come from Bangladesh to West Bengal. Even after too many years has passed by, but people who have come from that land, they are yet to recognize themselves as a person who has come up from Bangladesh. They have the fear. If they say that, if they just ask for justice, kind of NRC or kind of that things, that nationality issues, that will hurt themselves. The nation will come up with a tremendous plan for them. And we have seen those examples for Assam also. We have seen those examples that you have to prove it yourself, whether you are an Indian or not. So you have to prove yourself to be an Indian or not. It is a question that is very much pertinent, but whether you are a human or not, nobody is going to ask you that things. So humanity is nowhere. Nationality is everywhere. You can have Indian, you can have Pakistani, you can have Syrian people, you have Bangladeshis, but you don't have a person who can ask for his or her own justice. So you have the fear in your mind. So we don't have a land in which we can hold our head high and we can come up out of fear and have the courage to ask any question. So I had said previous discussion that you have to ask questions. But if the penalty for asking questions is this much, you are going to ruin yourself, not only yourself, your everything, then I think it is very much difficult to ask for justice. Even in a democracy like India, you don't have that much liberty. And it is very much clear. In Jammu Kashmir, we have 2.5 or more than that, I think 6 months of internet shutdown. in this democracy also. Who is responsible? And I'm not going to name anyone. But this is the fact. Humanity is going to be ruined every day and every minute. So until and unless we are going to break those walls, like Lenin has once told, right, that there will be a world without any walls in between the countries. So if that is the thing, we can imagine, we can think of that. At that time, I think your question could be asked, not before that. Thank you, Kavya.
Okay. Thank you, Shiladitya. I'm just out of words. So next we have Amit and Anubik Day. Is there any questions from your side that you need to ask to the contestants?
No question from my side.
And Amit?
Yeah, one from Slavic said that how can we come up from that fear? You have said that you have talked about Rabindranath Tagore. You have talked about one of the famous poem of his. So what is the solution from coming out that fear?
A solution is there, but if it is feasible or not, I don't know. I have said the only one solution. You have to give humanity the best marks. Before everything, you have to fight for the humanity. Until and unless you can make sure that every human in this world, whether he is from Congo or Belgium or Japan, he has the same rights. You are not going to do anything. Tell me one thing, what is the purpose of the Security Council if everyone is same in this world? Why only those 6 countries are there? Why not a country like Fiji is not going to tell that humanity has the equal right for everyone? So how can you think? Suppose I'm giving you one example and I'm asking you for that. Tell me, if suppose there is a problem regarding Fiji Island and America and England is against Fiji. So how the solution could come up? Who is going to protect it? Because the veto power that has been given to those countries, they can do anything against the humanity, anything against the human normal people, right?
You have not provided a solution. I
Sorry?
have asked you a solution and you are not providing solution. You are asking me the question.
No. I'm giving it. I've given the solution. I have given you the problem. I've given you the solution that humanity should be given the highest points. You should give every and each nation equal opportunity to speak up. That is the solution.
So,
In
you have
United
said about-
Nations also, you should give everyone proper and equal contribution.
You have said about nations. Let's talk about a simple example of our city or village.
Well, Amit, why don't you let Avansha speak then? If he is not, yeah, ask the same question to Avansha then. He has given his solution. Ask.
But there is some different question for Avanza. She said that we ourselves need to be into the political arena. So when I have a fear of my life, when I have a fear of my family, when I have a fear of responsibilities of my family, how can we in that arena, those who are more powerful than us or than me, how can I fight them?
Amit, I would really like to reflect upon the kind of freedom fighters we had back in our time when this similar situation which you have pointed was there. So imagine a world, imagine a country where those freedom fighters didn't come up. Those freedom fighters didn't had even the guts to stray forward and ask the questions and just stay in that kind of a fear or zone where they were in a perpetual condition that this is going to take my life, this is going to fear of my family, and ultimately it is going to impact me, so I don't want to stand up. Can you imagine a world where this kind of situation happened? So in a very similar context, let me just finish. In a very
I have understood what you want to say. I have understood what you want to say. Now a simple question to you. In the last election, who do you vote? Do you remember the name of that person?
no. That is what I wanted to say, that because of an online issue, I have been, very distant from my hometown, and I was not able to vote. But I definitely tried whether I can go back, but there was multiple circumstances. But I always wanted to ensure that if there are any schemes where I can have, online voting systems, or where I can be in distant participants and then I can vote. But these are very contextual questions, Amit, where we can say that, as a part of being individual, you can play a role to these kind of situations. But then eventually, yes, I am not saying that it can, come up to, individual level, that you should also there, you should, but just a retrospection, that whether you can do it or not is only I'm asking. Think about that, whether these things can up, because if 100 people thinks of these things, even one can stand up, that going to change the number, that's going to change the history. So I'm not saying that every individual has to do that in a certain kind of a way, but then yes, the thought of it, just a mere thought of it, the thinking should be ingrained into the individual level. And if we start right now, it can happen earlier. There could be multiple reforms, and there could be a lot of things where you can, encourage and, make sure that these people are participating their way. That falls upon the shoulders of the leaders. That falls upon the shoulder of what current administration is going along, and what electoral forms and reforms we can change. These things, if happen, definitely we can come up with this. That was a very long lasting way and, vision which we can have for the society, which we can have for the individual. I'm not saying it can start right up, right front, right here at this point of time. But yes, we can aim for it, we can vision for it, and then we can definitely have that kind of a society where actually the democracy is for the people, by the people, and from the people.
So now you are talking about the future prospects. We don't know future. I'm just talking about what will happen tomorrow. Will I get food tomorrow or not? Now another thing which you have just mentioned, uh, from 2014 till 2019, sedition charges have increased by 72%. That is the data from our National Crime Bureau. It simply means that if I'm going to raise any question towards government, whether it's by on Twitter, whether it's in any public forum and whatever, the police will came, and there is law to abide me. Case over. Simple. I cannot come out from the sedition charges for 180 days. So there are multiple problems, Abhansha. And first solution from my side, it should be that the constitution or those laws should be changed from which we can speak out. For
But I said
example,
the system needs to be in place first, and then you should aim for that. I'm not saying that, we are in a position right now to implement all these things, but how you have to start from somewhere. If you not start from somewhere, you not start these progressive thoughts to come along, you are not, progressing ahead. So rightly, correctly said that there is a fear of the administration, there is lot many things, but that's what we have to tackle around. Otherwise, it's just a vicious cycle that, okay, you don't do it, then again you are going to be impacted. You don't do it, again you are going to be impacted. So
we
that's
don't have
where
any
my stand.
concrete idea, Avansha. Right now, also, and in future, I don't know what will happen, but right now, we don't have any concrete idea. Today, the police is for our safety, for our protection. But whenever we see a policeman, we fear. Why that fear? We remove to that fear, ma'am. And yes, maybe I am talking about like some practical issues, but yes, these problems are there in Indian society. We vote for money. What the worst can happen? And I have known a lot of men who directly say that yes, we will vote for money because we don't earn so much. Because whatever government it is, we need to earn, we need to eat food that night, or else we will go uh, hungry. So that is the problem, and we need to
I
find
understand,
solution.
completely agree. And that's where we went, to the earlier discussion we had in FDNI, where, basic amenities providing to citizens so that everybody is at the same level playing field. Nobody is scared of their life. Nobody is scared of their basic things. Nobody has to compromise their, physical ability, family needs. And that comes into a picture where you are voting for a democracy, or where you are voting for that election process. So once
This
that
is
comes in place, then only you can have a fair fair kind of an electoral process. So yes, we have already discussed that what can be changes, what could be the changes we can do, practical levels of implementation, what the system can implement, and that's what my whole point is. But I just wanted to again highlight that if you are not progressing in the thoughts which where you want to be in 20 years, in 30 years, in 50 years, then again just being stuck to those practical implementations and problems is not going to solve the problem. You have to come up, you have to say it right, and you have to start working along it. That's what I think we as UPSC civil aspirants can think about when we are in charge in some any or the other kind of a domain in our organization in the country.
Okay, I would
No
like
more
to
answers.
ask,
Yeah, nothing from this.
That was really a very
I have
nice.
a question.
Really enjoyed this.
Kavya, I have just a very small question from both of them.
Yeah, sure, sir. we can.
Just, I want a very short reply, no explanations required. Explanations, we don't have time. Just suggest some measures, whatever be the, in terms of political reforms, economic reforms, or judicial reforms, and just list 3 to 4 measures, the most important measures you think are required in our country.
I'll start, sir.
Yeah.
So first of all, which we have time and again discussed, the transparency of the background and willingness and the portfolios of the leaders who are participating in the elections. Basic thing. Let's to start with that. That how well educated they are, what are their what are they going to do, and a marking system and a grading system of the government. Basically, that what they have done so far and how, and making them in public. The very basic thing, that what transparency, how much transparency we can bring into individual election people, how they are the representative they are going to there, right from the very local level, that whether basic MP or MLA, where he stands at present, and what he's going to do for the next 5-year tenure, 10-year tenure in his the democratic or the election life or the administration part of it. That is one part of it. Being totally transparent about the individuals candidates electing, and displaying their results and the kind of efforts they have taken at the public level. Another could be, sir, where a very transparent system of each and every process for right from implementing water system, so not just the leader is responsible, but also who all works under him is responsible for the smooth functioning of the system. So that would be the second, where a system is in place where public knows whether their work has been done and who is at the fault if not been done. So that kind of a transparency system in electoral and the social conduit of the administration. Another could be that when you elect, there could be what happens after majority is not up. I have no clue right now that what will happen if nota is there. Is there election again going to happen, because it costs a lot. The election process is entirely a costly affair which takes upon. So what if this happens, and are there any backup candidates which can present themselves and get tickets and then be electing further? So these are 2-3 points, sir, which I feel if in place, there could be a lot of brainstorming further to refine exact execution of this. There could be a lot of leaders from academy and industry which can contribute that this can be a smoother process further. But right now we can start just with the idea.
Sir, may I start?
Shiladitya, you can go ahead.
Shiladitya, go ahead.
I think Amit was saying something.
No, Amit is.
Okay, sir. Sir, I will add 1 point for each of the 3 pillars. One is for our legislation. So they have to make it clear whether they are going to serve it voluntarily or it is their job. If it is voluntarily, they should not be paid that much because they are doing the voluntary service. And if it is job, in that time, there should be some qualification, because without qualification, nobody should be entered in any job. So at least academic qualification or something should be there. So they have to choose either or. If it is job, then there should be a qualification status. if it is voluntary service, there should not be that much money that is being paid to them. This is for the legislation. For the executive part, I think that colonial aspects or the colonial sentiments of these executives should be barred. For example, the system of observer for any election. Okay, so for that we are going to spend a lot of money. Some people, for the sake of interview, I am not going to say all those things. Okay, but I'm sharing this here only. These IS and UP or the IPS, they are going to do their job as an observer in any election, but they don't have anything to do at that time, but they just spend their money, our money. It is a huge money that is unaudited money that is going to spend for them. And this colonial attitude of these executives should be barred. For judiciary, I think they should bar the attitude that they know everything. For now, the judicial part, they just say anything, they pass any verdict, and this judicial activism that is going to do a very harm to our society. Like, they don't have any idea about the executives. The actual part which is going to be done, it is done by the executives, and being totally unaware of the systems, the judiciary part, they are just going to pass any verdict. I think that should be barred. These three things I am going to add for this. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Shiladitya. Now it's time for voting, and it's a single phase voting. We can just give names of whom we think both of them was equally best. And
Amit?
now we are going to.
Yes, Amit and Kavya. Kavya, you should also vote in this round, and I will also give my voting. So just give it in the chat box. Yes, Amit, waiting from your side.
Sir, out of 10, no?
No, just the name.
Name.
Okay. So I can announce this, Kavya. Okay, we have less time. So the winner for today's debate is Avancha. Avancha, congratulations for being being the winner of this debate. You have made it a habit. You are doing very well. Keep it up. And I would like to thank all the participants. I would like to thank Kavya, Shiladitya, Amit, Anobek to make this event successful. And let us keep doing this exercise, and see you in the next edition of FTNI debate. Thank you very much.